My name is Teshia, and these are the first chairs that I ever made when I was at the University of Michigan, and I built them myself. I am currently a graduate student at the Rhode Island School of Design, and while I'm part of the new graduates, I have not quite graduated yet. Following finishing of a thesis in May, I will be out into the real world. And with a transition like that, one of the big things that I've been asking myself, especially because I am both a designer and a maker, is why should I make things? It's really hard to make things once you're outside of school if you need things like a wood shop or metalworking. And in our curriculum at RISD in particular, we really value the ability to create your own prototypes and your own objects. So initially, when I started asking myself, why do I make things? Early on, it was about form. It was about discovering how to use a material in a new way. And I was fascinated with bent lamination. This chair I designed in Copenhagen, Denmark. And there's something really intoxicating about the ability to bring something from a napkin sketch to a sketch model to a shop drawing to something that exists in real life. And I wanted to make really pretty things. I wanted to make things that had great form, but that wasn't quite enough. While they were usable, I found that I was learning a lot more once they existed in 3 dimensions. So it got me thinking about design as making and making as research. So I moved on to another iteration of the conversation chairs that were still sort of a huge endeavor to build. This is an 8-foot bend in Luan plywood, which requires not only a very large mold, but a lot of really good friends to help you spread epoxy for many hours. And I really enjoyed the making process and the design process, but what was exciting about them is when I started to see how people would interact with them. It was actually very different because while they were furniture, they existed in a scale that started to become architectural. So then I moved on to my BFA thesis. This is about 2 years ago. And I knew that I wanted to sort of play in that experimentation with seating design specifically because I've always been really interested in chairs. And I wanted to experience that sort of work through the lens of another discipline. So I began a really fruitful collaboration with Anya Klapischek, who is a classically trained dancer. And what I would do with her is basically give her words that we dealt with in seating a lot, things like comfort, things like relief, things like stress. And she would sort of take those and create gesture phrases that dealt with motion, that dealt with posture. And then I would map those again in terms of the structure that she was using as a way to really rethink the way the body can interact with an object. And then I began the process of designing a chair after, which was something that was quite different for me, because usually I had a conception of what the chair would be initially and then got to the point where I would refine the design and then build it. So I left school at the University of Michigan and went right to RISD with just a 3-month break in between and didn't really return to seating as a student. I had done more things in furniture design that revolved around sound art and lighting. But I did return to seating recently as a teacher. And so the funny thing about teaching and the tension between sort of a teaching practice and a creative practice is that you have to force your students to kind of think about things in a new way. And so the course that I developed with a co-teacher, Ryung Kim, at RISD was called Rethinking Seating. And our initial plan was basically that we wanted to force our students to not think about seating design in terms of a leg, a back, and a seat, but actually think about what chairs could do for the body or what a chair even needs to be a chair. It was really difficult because we dealt with a very broad skill set in this class. We wanted people to be experiencing the empowering feeling of building at full scale, but they're freshmen to graduate students, so the freshmen don't really know how to use an X-Acto blade yet, and then the grad students are sort of like, oh, I'm getting a degree in architecture. And so we had to find ways to really allow them to mock things up in full scale. So one of the projects that we did was a rocking chair workshop, and they were forced to basically create a rocking chair that dealt with motion. They each had a prompt at full scale, and it had to last the duration of the critique and move the user in some specific way. And so early on in this class, what we were really trying to do was kind of empower our students and lend them confidence to build at full scale if they never had, and understand what it meant to experience those objects at full scale. And then after that, it became kind of breaking down the preconceived notions of what we think of a chair being. And so we ran this workshop, which was originally developed by Chris Rose at the University of Brighton, where as opposed to drawing the chairs as a third-party perspective, we asked our students to sit in the chair and draw it at full scale in front of them, their experience of it. And what starts to happen is that as you layer these, we ask every student to get up after about a minute or two of drawing and then switch seats and draw over top of the drawing that had already been there. You get this sort of divergence between what you understand as the volumes, the shapes, the components of the object, and you start to get into this realm of embodied knowledge that you have certain areas of pressure, of weight, of contact, of posture, and you start to get all of these kind of places of density where you see exactly what that chair is doing and what sort of scenario it's putting you in. So while doing this and realizing that I have a pretty distinct interest in pedagogy and really the metastructure of why we should be making things and how we should be designing curriculums, I've been asking these questions that why do we need to make in universities? One of the big things is that in the United States, going to a university, especially for design, is extremely cost prohibitive. It's extremely expensive. And when you start to do things like build elaborate furniture, it becomes exponentially more expensive. And so while I'm going through this transition to graduation and looking for a wood shop so I can continue to do my work, I've been trying to look at alternative spaces. So the space that I work in right now, this is actually just part of it during finals week, at the Rhode Island School of Design is pretty interesting because it's a place of constant activity, which is really important to a creative process, the idea that we need to make a mess. But I want to look at this and then reflect it back on other spaces of making and hacking. This is NYC Resistor in Brooklyn, New York, where the MakerBot was originally invented. And so I'm going to be traveling this summer to New York, Berlin, and Vienna to really see the origin of spaces like this and see if there can be a symbiotic relationship between grassroots spaces for education and making and the university. Because the fact of the matter is that our educational spaces may change a lot, but our desire to make things probably won't. Thanks.